morning J3. I'm at home today, ready to read you chapter 14. As you can see, I've got some company. Say good morning, buddy. No, he just wants to look out the window. Anyway, here's chapter 14. Everything hurt. Everything felt weighted, pinned down. The woodlight was digging into the base of my spine, satchel squashed beneath me. I pulled it out and cracked my lids open. I gripped the woodlight until I felt solid again, tried to sit up, head throbbing viciously. A dark, worried face swam into sight. I squinted until it came into focus, then clamped my eyes shut. Shock ratcheted through me in cold waves. I was dead. I must be. But I didn't feel dead. I could feel the ground, feel the pulse in my neck. I peered up again. The thick hallow of black curls was clumped and matted. The face dirtier than Signora Odori would ever allow. But there she was. Lupe? I knew it was you, even with all your hair gone. I threw my aching arms around her, pressing my face into her musty curls. Lupe squeezed back so hard I felt my shoulders pop. She was shaking, and I could feel the nubs of her spine against my forearms. Are you all right? I whispered. She sat back on her heels and rubbed her face. Better now you're here. Why are you wearing Papa's cloak? It's a long story. Lupe let out a hiccuping laugh and drew her legs up to her chin. I bet. Her skirts rustled. She was still dressed in pink taffeta, though now it was muddy and torn around the hem. Trust Lupe not to have changed out of her birthday dress before leaving for the Forgotten Territories. We thought you were dead. I could not keep the wonder out of my voice. I thought I might be too. What happened? It's a long story. She had dark hollows under her eyes. Doce found me. And Doce? She's a governor's daughter too, sort of. Her mother Anna is leader of the Banished. The Banished? My skin crawled. They found me in one of the villages, Gree or something. Gree. This did not make sense, that she was here and alive and dressed in her best clothes, talking about the Banished. Lupe, we need to get away from here. The Banished killed Kata. No, said Lupe. It was something else that killed her. My heart hammered in my ears. What? Can we wait until Doce gets here? She explains much better than me. Anyway, I was in Gree because my horse bolted and I couldn't stop it, and it was running towards the sea, but Doce stopped it. I fell off and landed right on some bones. Did you see them? Yes, I saw them. What happened there? Lupe's eyes went wide as plates. The air killed them. That's what Doce said. Something floated from the ground and made it hard to breathe, like poison. Poisoned air? I couldn't stop staring at her. But I found your bracelet. Where? I took it out of my pocket. I pulled it off someone who attacked me. Realisation dawned on Lupe's muddy face as she took it. Oh, it was you. They were just trying to get the chickens. The animals are all gone, you see. Lupe shuddered. It sounds awful. They all ran into the sea. The chickens? That's why the attackers had left as soon as they'd seized the horses with the chicken cages. Doce made stew, except for this one chicken. It was all mangy and grumpy, so they let me keep it. Like a pet, you know. She pointed to a pen in the shadows. I scuttled over. It couldn't be. And yet it was. Miss La, pecking irritably at some seeds. I made to pick her up, but she squawked and snapped her beak. She was obviously not as happy to see me as I was her. Do you know each other? Lupe frowned. I nodded but didn't explain. It felt too long a story. I looked about, noticing for the first time the stakes beaten into the ground in a circle around us, stretching high into the branches above. A cage, surrounded by black forest. The ground was soft, not packed hard and dusty like in Grimera, and the air smelt of stale water, though I could not see any. I checked the satchel, pulling out Mars' map. This must be the Marisma, the swamp at the centre of the island. I traced the route to Grimera. If we could escape the cage, we could get home. I placed it carefully back in the bag, alone with the woodlight. You don't mind about the bracelet, do you? I gave it to Doce to say thank you for saving me from the Tibikiners. I frowned. Tibby what? Lupe shivered. I'd rather not talk about them right now. I couldn't decide if I was dead after all or dreaming. Nothing Lupe was saying made sense. Lupe being here, saying anything at all didn't make sense. She was frowning at me. Isabella, are we still friends? I took her hand. Of course we are. You don't think I'm rotten? She looked on the verge of tears. My stomach twisted with guilt. No, I'm sorry I said those things. She nodded. That's all right. I picked up the bracelet and tied it back around her wrist. Have you seen your father yet? My father? Lupe frowned. Why? Is he here? We came to rescue you. You didn't think I got here on my own, did you? He came to rescue me? Lupe tilted her head, bird-like, with her nest of knotted curls. My father? Yes, me and Pablo and some of his men. Lupe's lips wobbled. He brought all those people in order to find me? Yes, I said, impatience growing. We need to get out of here. We need to find them. Lupe's eyes caught on something behind me. I turned slowly. For a moment there was nothing. Then a girl stepped forward into the clearing through an entrance concealed in the circle of stakes, emerging as if the air itself had parted and formed her. The banished girl came closer. Her movements were fluid, her body and dark clothes smeared with mud, except for a relatively clean stretch of cloth bound around her arm. My mouth went dry as I remembered bringing my blade up in Gris, the feeling of resistance. Had I done that? I couldn't bring myself to meet her eye, flinching as she held something towards me. You need to drink, said the girl, thrusting out a clay pot. It's boiled. It's safe. My mouth was parched. The pot was heavier than she had made it seem. I gulped the water down, barely pausing for breath. It tasted strange, like earth. She says my father was with her, Doce. Is he here? Asked Lupe. Doce nodded. You asked too many questions. And Pablo? I said, stomach full of water. Is he here? I don't know their names. A boy. He's tall like a man, but he's wearing a white tunic. They were all in uniform, blue, with gold stitching. We're keeping them over there. She gestured vaguely into the darkness. I noticed her accent wasn't smooth like Lupe's or mine. Her words were full of flicks and clicks, her tongue clacking. What's going to happen to them? Asked Lupe. Doce didn't answer. I could guess it was nothing good. So no boy in a white tunic? No. One of the small knots in my chest slipped open. Pablo had escaped. Doce must have mistaken my expression for something else because she said, I'm sorry. I'm sure your friend will be all right. She didn't sound convincing. All right? Why wouldn't he be? All the dangers seemed accounted for. The banished were obviously the ones who had attacked us in Gris. Doce looked towards Lupe. You haven't told her about... I have. I just couldn't tell her what. I waited for someone to tell. Tell me what? About the Tibiquinas. Lupe's voice was lowered. I remembered all over again. Kata. What about the Tibiquinas? Doce sucked in a long breath and the staccato in her tone grew more pronounced. They came from below, 10 days ago. They killed that girl in your village. Nearly killed Lupe too. One had her cornered in Gris when we found her. We killed it, made the cross out of its teeth to warn others off. But creatures like that, they don't have souls. They get scared. They don't get scared. It was awful. Lupe's voice was tiny. It was the biggest thing I've ever seen, all drooly and so black. It was like it sucked all the light out of the world, finished Doce. But what are they? I said, impatient. They're demon dogs. Demon dogs? My mind whirred. Like in the myth of Arinta? They're like huge wolves. We thought that's what they were at first, said Doce. Well, there were wolves on the island. I hoped I sounded like Dar would if he ever told this. Calm, reasonable. They used to live in the forest, then they moved to the caves. They're not like those sort of wolves. They're bigger than wolves, Lupe insisted, and black as soot, with eyes as red as fire. I looked at Doce for guidance, but she only nodded solemnly and said, My mother says they're Yotes. They're his fire dogs, his Tibiquinas. They've been sent to clear the island. I felt stupid, but all I could do was repeat her words and hope they made more sense in my mouth. Clear the island? Before Yote takes it. That's why the animals left. They feel Yote first. Well, first after the island. You must have noticed the trees. Yes, but you can offer a better explanation? For trees that look like they live off ash? For For the water drying up? For the animals fleeing? Chpt's voice was as tight as a tripwire. I shook my head. If this is true, it is, what are we going to do? Escape to the sea like the animals? Chpt's eyes were wide in the gloom. We're leaving today. Where are we going? Lupe piped up. Gramera first, Chpt said. We're going to take the ship. My father's ship? My voice was unsteady. It won't work. What? The ship. But before I could explain about the burning, a strange clicking started. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, a sound that could have been far off rain or the chirruping of insects, but for Chpt's reaction to it. She bolted upright, away from us, and began clicking her tongue. Miss Law squawked, scrabbling around her pen, and I lifted her up to try and quieten her. It grew louder and louder, and I sensed something surrounding the clearing. The clicking stopped. Chpt bowed her head slightly. Mother. I squinted towards the trees Chpt was addressing, but could see nothing until the woman was nearly within touching distance. She too was small, strong-looking, dressed in mud and dark cloth, holding a staff. Her weather-beaten face was lined, but quite like her daughter's. Except for the eyes, there was no gentleness there. Even Miss Law stopped struggling under her gaze. A scared child would irritate this woman rather than soften her. I stared back. She took another step forward. Suddenly we were surrounded as dozens more mud-clad figures entered the cage or climbed the branches to peer down at us. Lupe had gone rigid beside me, but I did not take my eyes off Chpt's mother. The woman began to circle, her back slightly rounded, her stride shortened by a limp. I saw a deep indent on her right calf, as if someone had scooped the flesh from it. When the woman spoke, her voice was clear and loud as a bell. We have a set now. What are you? The governor's son? His servant, I said, willing myself to sound unafraid. Why do you wear his cloak? She's a girl, mother, said Chpt. Oh, said Anna, in a tone that showed it would take more than a girl in trousers to shock her. Why do you serve a dog? I shifted uncomfortably, hoping Lupe was in her usual state of not paying attention. I had no choice. Just as those who were banished had no choice, just as the man who did this. She turned her back, lifting her tunic, and Lupe made a retching sound. Had no choice? Her shoulders were a mess of scars, criss-crossing in raised ridges, as if a tree were sending its roots through her back. Anna rolled her shoulders and a crack issued from her spine as the movement sent a spasm across the scar tissue. I stroked Miss Law's soft feathers, trying to calm myself. There is always a choice. Now we have to decide what to do with your master. She turned to Lupe. Your father. The crowd parted and a small group of men in governor's blue were shoved into a cage. No Pablo. I counted them quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5. I strained to see their faces. One was in dark blue governor's robes, Marquez, wearing a Dory's spare set. Lupe was frowning at the men. My father isn't... Lupe, interrupted Marquez. My child. Lupe opened and closed her mouth like a fish. I don't... The other men caught on. Governor, said one, the journey was hard. It has taken its toll on all of us. Yes, sir, said another hurriedly. Do not be upset if your daughter does not recognise you. I did not think they could risk being much more obvious, but Lupe still did not seem to get what was going on. I am not surprised your daughter chooses not to know you, snapped Anna. I would be ashamed to have such a father. Marquez, stop. Governor Adori stepped through the open door. No one moved for a long moment. I felt my pulse thrumming in my wrists. The silence broke as Lupe leapt up. Papa! Anna hissed and stepped behind them, clenched around her staff. Stay there, Lupe, said the governor. Lupe was nudged roughly back to the ground beside me. She started shaking again, and I passed Miss Law to her. Don't let them see you're afraid, I whispered. She held the chicken tightly to her chest. Marquez dropped his head, defeated. Sir, I would have gladly... It is not your place, Marquez. It is not your place to call yourself governor. Anna put mocking emphasis on the last word as she stalked up to him. I know why you came. You had a chance to redeem yourself and you failed. She kicked his legs out from under him and he went down hard. Anna clicked her tongue and his hands were tied tightly behind him. Then I will pay, said Adori, struggling to his knees, but let my daughter and companions go. Anna chuckled joylessly. I'll do better than that. I'll take them with us when we leave. You're leaving? Why? The tension between them was as taut as a cloud storm. You know why, Anna spat, because there's a deeper darkness here, a darkness we cannot defeat. I care more for my people's safety than for revenge. That is the true mark of a leader. The banished clicked their tongues like a ripple of applause. What deeper darkness? Marquez said, raising an eyebrow. Anna fixed her eyes on the man and strode towards him. One that will shake that smirk off your face and swallow the ground from under your feet. Chpt is coming. He snorted. That old wives' tale? That superstition? Is it superstition that drove the animals into the sea? Is it superstition that murdered one of ours? If I'm not much mistaken, snapped Chpt's mother, that superstition is what brought your governor here in the first place. She faced the governor again. Now we must get moving. She whistled and the men were hauled to their feet. Chpt led us to them. Lupe hugged her father tightly as soon as Anna's back was turned. We don't have time for this now, said Adori, shrugging off Lupe's arms. You must be brave, Lupe. He turned his exhausted gaze on me. I believe you have something of my daughter's. The locket. I took it off and Lupe held out her hand. How did you know Isabella had it? Isabella? The governor looked at me long and hard. Of course. The secret lifted off my shoulders, but I tensed, waiting for some punishment for deceiving him. It did not come. He seemed unable to focus on anything but his daughter. Put the locket on, Lupe. Don't give it away again. It is part of our history, a piece of our story. There we go. That's chapter 14. Hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.